The frost cracked under her boots like tiny bones. Each step a brittle echo in the pre-dawn stillness of the stable yard. The air bit, sharp with the scent of frozen earth, old manure, and the sweet, dusty perfume of hay bales stacked high in the looming shed row. Wind whistled through the empty stalls, a lonely sound that found the hollow places inside her. Late November. The time of year when the world felt stripped bare, raw, and the light stayed thin and weak. Maggie pulled her worn jacket tighter, the collar rough against her cheek. She didn't belong here, not among the ghosts of thundering hooves and the lingering adrenaline of the track. This place smelled of her brother, Liam, leather polish, liniment, the sharp tang of his sweat after a morning gallop. He was everywhere. In the worn handle of the pitchfork leaning against the wall, in the faded blue ribbon tacked haphazardly to a beam, in the profound, aching silence that had swallowed the world whole 3 months ago. The lawyer's words still echoed, flat, and final. He left you everything, Maggie. The house, what savings there were, and the horse. The horse, his horse, Valor. He stood at the far end of the row, a dark shape in the shadowed stall. Not pacing, not restless, just standing, a statue carved from shadow and tension. The weak morning light filtering through the dusty window caught the deep, burnished red of his coat, a thoroughbred's proud color, now muted by neglect and the grime of confinement. Maggie hesitated, the frost crunching again beneath her feet. His head turned slowly, not the quick, alert flick of a curious animal, but a deliberate, heavy movement. One dark eye fixed on her. It held no fear, no welcome, just a deep, watchful stillness, like water over stone. She saw the way he subtly shifted his weight, barely perceptible, off his left foreleg. A faint tremor ran through the muscle of his shoulder. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, older. Pain held in check by sheer, stubborn will. Liam's last desperate gamble, the broken colt he'd bought cheap and poured his soul into, believing in a comeback that never came. This was his legacy. Not trophies, not glory, just this wounded creature radiating silent endurance. Her breath clouded in the frigid air as she approached. Slow steps, deliberate, trying to project calm she didn't feel, her own grief a raw, jagged thing just beneath her ribs. Valor watched her come. His ears, tipped with black, swiveled minutely, tracking her sound. His nostrils flared once, drawing in her scent, city soap, wool, the unfamiliar residue of a life lived far from barns and dirt. He blew out a long, warm breath that plumed white in the cold, the sound loud in the quiet. She stopped a few feet from the stall door, close enough to see the fine lines etched around his eye, the dust motes dancing in the weak light on his coat, the way the tendons in his neck stood out like taut cables. His gaze never left her face. Guarded, assessing. Wary trust meeting guarded heart across a chasm of shared, unspoken loss. She didn't speak. Words felt too loud, too brittle for this space heavy with memory and animal presence. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted a hand, not to touch, just to rest it on the top rail of the stall door, knuckles white with the cold and the effort of stillness. Valor's head lowered a fraction. His nostrils flared again, wider this time, sampling the air near. Her fingers, the scent of leather from her old gloves, the lingering warmth of her skin. He took a single, shuffling step forward, the movement stiff, favoring that left leg. The distance closed by inches. Maggie held her breath. He stretched his neck, his muzzle hovering just above her gloved hand. Warm breath ghosted over her knuckles. For a long, suspended moment, he simply breathed her in. Then, with infinite slowness, he nudged the worn leather with the soft velvet of his nose. Once. A whisper. of contact. Not demanding, not fearful. Just acknowledgement. A tentative bridge thrown across the silence. Maggie felt the pressure, light as a fallen leaf, and something tight inside her chest, something frozen since Liam's funeral, cracked infinitesimally. She stayed like that, hand resting on the rail, his breath warming the leather. Minutes bled away, marked only by the rhythmic sound of his breathing and the distant caw of a crow. The cold seeped deeper into her bones, but she didn't move. This fragile truce felt sacred, precious, the only warmth in the frozen yard. Finally, the numbness in her feet forced her to shift. She withdrew her hand slowly, careful not to startle him. Valor watched her, his dark eyes still unreadable, but the rigid tension in his neck had eased the slightest bit. He didn't retreat. Turning away felt like tearing something. She took a step back towards the path leading to the small, empty house Liam had left her. The frost crunched again. She didn't look back, focusing on the path, on the weight of solitude settling back onto her shoulders. The wind snatched at her hair. Then she heard it. A soft, hesitant shuffle on the straw behind her, not a retreat into the shadows. A step forward. She froze. Another shuffle, closer to the stall door this time. Slowly, heart hammering against her ribs, Maggie turned. Valor stood pressed against the bars, his head stretched out slightly over the door. He wasn't looking at the hay net. He wasn't looking at the empty yard. His dark, liquid gaze was fixed intently, unwaveringly, on her back, as if he'd been waiting for her to turn, as if he had something to say. The early morning light caught the deep red of his coat, highlighting the proud arch of his neck, the powerful lines that spoke of speed now chained by an invisible flaw. He held her gaze, that ancient watchfulness back in his eye, but underneath it, something else flickered. Not the fierce spirit of a racehorse, but a quiet, desperate question. Why was she leaving? Where was Liam? Why did everything hurt? The silent plea hung between them, sharp as the frost in the air. Maggie stood rooted to the spot, the vast emptiness of the stable yard pressing in, the only movement the plume of her own ragged breath and the unwavering, expectant stare of the broken horse Liam had loved. She didn't know why. She didn't know how to fix him. She didn't know how to fix herself. But when she took another step towards the house, a soft, questioning nicker followed her, and then the distinct, uneven sound of hooves on concrete. Not retreating into the stall, following her, step by stiff step, along the fence line, his breath warm clouds in the cold, his gaze never leaving her back. She didn't turn again. She just walked, the crunch of frost under her boots now accompanied by the halting, persistent rhythm of his steps behind her, a wounded shadow refusing to be left alone in the silence. The halting rhythm of Valor's steps behind her became the soundtrack of Maggie's days. He didn't follow her into the house. That line remained uncrossed. But anywhere outside, within the boundaries of the neglected paddock and the stable yard, he was her shadow. A stiff, silent, watchful shadow. She'd be chopping carrots at the outdoor sink, the knife hitting the wood with a dull thunk, and feel the warmth of his breath near her elbow before she even saw him. She'd walk the fence line checking for rot, the frost long gone, replaced by the sucking mud of early spring, and hear the uneven clop, squelch, keeping pace 10 feet behind. His gaze was a constant weight, a dark, liquid question. She couldn't answer. He wasn't affectionate. He didn't nuzzle for treats, though she brought apples, carrots, the sweet molasses grain Liam used to give him. Valor would accept them, his lips whiskering her palm with surprising delicacy, but his eyes never softened. They remained watchful, distant, fixed on some point beyond her shoulder, or boring into her own with unsettling intensity. He flinched at loud noises, The slam of the feed room door, a car backfiring on the distant road, his whole body tensing, that left foreleg trembling visibly until the threat passed. But it was the names that truly unsettled her. She talked to him, filling the silence Liam had left, rambling stories about her life before, awkward apologies for her clumsy grooming, muttered frustrations about leaky faucets. He'd stand, head lowered, seemingly indifferent, until she said Liam's name, not deliberately, not often, just once, sighing as she struggled with a bale of hay. Liam always made this look easy. Valor's head snapped up, not startled, but alerted. His ears pricked forward, swiveling towards her voice, his gaze sharpening, searching her face with a sudden, focused intensity. He took a stiff step closer, nostrils flaring wide. The hope in that moment, raw and desperate, was a physical blow. She saw it, the flicker of recognition, the expectation that he would appear around the corner. It died just as quickly when only Maggie stood there, breathless and guilty under his scrutiny. His head lowered again, the weight seeming heavier, the watchfulness returning, tinged now with a deeper confusion, a sharper edge of loss. He'd turn away then, limping back towards the shadows of his stall, leaving Maggie feeling like she'd broken something fragile. The tack room was a time capsule. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through the grimy window. Liam's scent was strongest here. Leather, liniment, saddle soap, sweat. Rows of bridles hung neatly. Bits, gleaming dully. Saddles rested on stands, worn leather telling stories of countless races. Maggie avoided it mostly, the ache too fresh. But the persistent drip from the old sink finally forced her inside one rain-slick afternoon. As she wrestled with the rusted tap, her elbow knocked a small carved wooden box off a cluttered shelf. It hit the concrete floor with a crack, spilling its contents. Bits of twine, a few loose screws, a tarnished silver dollar, and a photograph. Face down, she picked it up. Her breath hitched. Liam, younger, grinning that reckless grin, his arm thrown over the neck of a gleaming, dark red colt. The colt's head was high, eyes bright, muscles bunched with barely contained energy. Valor. Before the fracture Liam had whispered about, the one the track vet missed until it was too late, the one that ended the dream. Written on the back in Liam's looping scrawl, Valor and me. Belmont hopefuls. Remember this fire, Mags. Remember. Beneath it, another line, the ink fresher, the handwriting tighter, jagged. He tries. God, he tries. Even when it breaks him, he keeps trying. Dam broke. Not a trickle, but a torrent. The raw grief she'd kept tamped down with busyness, and the horse's silent demands surged up, choking her. The photo slipped from her fingers. She slumped against the cold metal sink, the sobs tearing out of her, ugly and gasping. 3 months of numbness shattered. The unfairness of it, Liam's life cut short, Valor's spirit trapped in a broken body, her own loneliness in this place saturated with ghosts. She slid down to the dusty floor, knees drawn up, face buried in her hands, lost in the storm. The smell of leather and her brother's ghost was suffocating. She didn't hear him approach. She only felt the warm gust of breath stirring her hair. Then, the solid, immense presence filling the tack room doorway. Valor stood there, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light. He didn't nicker, didn't nudge. He simply stood, watching her crumpled form. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped inside. The space was cramped for his size, but he maneuvered carefully, his stiff leg dragging slightly. He stopped beside her, his broad shoulder inches from her hunched back. The warmth radiating from his body was immense, a living furnace against the damp chill of the room. Maggie kept sobbing, the sound muffled against her knees. Then she felt it. the softest brush, of velvet against the crown of her head, his muzzle, not demanding, not pushing, just resting there, lightly. His warm breath stirred her hair with each slow, deep exhale. He didn't move. He simply stood, a silent, solid pillar in the cramped, grief-filled space, his head lowered over hers. His breathing, deep and steady, became a rhythm she unconsciously matched. The storm of her sobs began to ease, the ragged gasps softening. The weight of his head, the warmth of his breath, the sheer, quiet presence of him anchored her. He didn't fix it. He didn't make it okay. He just stayed. He held the space for her breaking until the breaking passed. Minutes stretched. The only sounds were the drip of the tap, the patter of rain on the roof, and their mingled breath. When the last shuddering sob finally subsided, leaving her hollowed out, but strangely calm, Valor lifted his head slightly. He nudged her shoulder, gently once. Then, with careful steps, he turned and limped slowly back out into the rain, leaving her alone in the quiet. Weeks bled into months. The sharp edges of grief didn't vanish, but they softened, weathered by routine and the quiet, grounding presence of the horse. Maggie found herself humming sometimes while mucking stalls. The silence of the house felt less like a void, more like a space slowly being refilled with her own tentative breaths. She learned Valor's rhythms, the subtle signs of his discomfort. She found a gentle equine therapist, a woman with quiet hands, who didn't promise miracles, but spoke of managing pain, rebuilding trust. Slowly, carefully, they began working on the stiff leg, not for racing, but for ease, for comfort. Valor changed too. The frantic edge in his watchfulness faded. He still followed her, but the distance between them lessened. He'd stand closer at the fence, resting his chin on the top rail while she worked nearby. He'd snuffle her pockets for carrots with a quiet eagerness, his dark eyes holding a flicker of something that wasn't just hunger, but recognition, connection. One warm June morning, Maggie was brushing him in the paddock, the rhythmic strokes smoothing his burnished coat. He stood relaxed, head low, one hind leg cocked in rest. She found herself tracing the powerful line of his shoulder, remembering the fire in that old photograph. "You were something, weren't you, boy?" she murmured, not expecting a response. Valor lifted his head, not sharply, but deliberately. He turned, not towards her voice, but towards the far corner of the paddock, near the old gnarled oak tree. He took a step, then another, his gait smoother than she'd ever seen it. Not perfect, but fluid, purposeful. He stopped near the base of the tree, where the roots twisted above the ground. He lowered his head and nudged at something half buried in the dirt and fallen leaves with his nose. Maggie approached cautiously, pushed aside the damp earth with her boot. It was a horseshoe, old, rusted, bent from impact, but clearly a racing plate. Liam's farrier mark was faint but visible on the inside curve. Valor's last race. The race where he'd run on a fracture, refusing to quit until the bone finally gave way. The ultimate sacrifice for the human he loved. She picked it up, the cold, heavy metal a stark weight in her hand. Valor watched her, his breath soft. He nudged, her arm gently, then turned his head, looking not at her but past her, towards the open field beyond the fence, not with the old, desperate question, but with a quiet, deep-breathed calm. He wasn't looking back at the pain, or even at her. He was looking forward, at the simple possibility of sun on grass, of a breeze carrying no scent of liniment or grief. Maggie looked down at the bent shoe, a symbol of shattered dreams and unimaginable pain endured for love. Then up at the horse who had borne it, who had borne her storm without flinching. The understanding washed over her, warm and quiet as the morning sun. Healing wasn't about forgetting the fracture. It was about learning to carry it differently. It was about finding the strength, not to run the old race, but to stand solid in the sun, bearing the weight with grace because someone, human or horse, believed you could. Valor had carried Liam's dream until it broke him. Now, he was carrying Maggie back towards her own life, one halting, sunlit step at a time. She slipped the rusted shoe into her pocket, its weight a grounding reminder. Valor blew out a soft breath, a warm puff of air against her cheek. He didn't need the track's roar anymore. His victory lap was this: the quiet field, the woman beside him breathing easier, and the simple, profound act of standing, unbroken in spirit, beneath the wide, forgiving sky. He had finished his race. Hers was just beginning, and for the first time in a long, frozen year, Maggie felt the ground firm beneath her feet, warmed by the unexpected presence of the broken horse who had taught her how to walk again. Sometimes, the deepest healing walks in on quiet hooves and stays until you remember how to stand. If this story found your hidden fractures, if Valor's quiet strength resonated in your own spirit, don't let the feeling fade. Hit subscribe. You need to be here. Because in the next video, we step into a world where a stray dog's midnight vigil holds a secret that shatters a town and stitches a broken family back together. That video drops tomorrow. Smash that bell icon so YouTube screams at you the second it goes live. And tell me below, what part of Valor's journey cracked your heart open? Your comments fuel these stories. Share this. Someone out there needs this reminder that even broken things can bear incredible weight and find their way back to the sun.